The crash came without warning. Marcus Webb felt his transport shudder as the solar flare tore through the navigation systems, sending him spiraling toward the ice planet below. His hands moved on instinct, years of piloting mining freighters keeping him focused even as alarms screamed around him. The viewport filled with swirling white as he plunged through the atmosphere, the hull groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. When the ship finally struck ground, it carved a burning scar across a field of crystalline ice that stretched endlessly in every direction. Marcus barely had time to register the impact before darkness took him. He woke to cold. Not the bitter freeze of vacuum, but something stranger, a cold that felt alive, aware, almost curious. His eyes cracked open to find himself lying on a surface that pulsed with inner light, geometric patterns flowing beneath him like frozen auroras. The air tasted of minerals and something indefinably sweet. "You should not have survived." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, melodic yet sharp as breaking glass. Marcus tried to sit up, his body protesting every movement. Through blurred vision, he saw her, a figure that seemed carved from winter itself. Her skin shimmered with translucent layers, faint blues and silvers shifting beneath the surface. Her hair moved like ice crystals suspended in still water, each strand catching and reflecting the ambient light. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive, like staring at a frozen waterfall mid-cascade. "Where?" His voice came out as barely a whisper. "Crystallis Prime, the heart of the Glacian sovereignty." She moved closer, and Marcus noticed her feet made no sound against the crystalline floor. "I am Seraphine Valdris. I rule this world." "Lucky me," Marcus managed, attempting a weak smile. "Crashing on a planet with actual leadership. Usually I hit abandoned moons." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You speak casually for someone who violated our isolation protocols." The solar flare didn't ask permission. Marcus finally managed to sit upright, taking stock of his surroundings. They were in a chamber that seemed grown rather than built, all flowing curves and natural formations that somehow formed walls and archways. "My navigation systems failed. I didn't choose to be here." Seraphine regarded him silently, her eyes, pale as ice but warm as starlight, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Your vessel's distress beacon was calling for someone named Julia. Your wife." The question struck deeper than any physical injury. Marcus looked away, his throat tightening. She died 3 years ago. Radiation exposure during a containment breach. I was off-world when it happened. He didn't know why he told her. Maybe it was the concussion. Maybe it was the way she asked, not with pity, but with something that felt like recognition. The silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but weighted with understanding. "My consort died 47 cycles ago," Seraphine said quietly, her luminescent form dimming slightly. "He was leading an expedition to our northern poles when a thermal vent erupted. By the time I reached him..." She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to a pendant at her throat, a piece of ice that never melted. I watched the light leave his eyes. Marcus met her gaze, and in that moment, two beings from vastly different worlds recognized the same wound in each other. The kind of loss that doesn't heal, only transforms into something you learn to carry. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "As am I." She turned away, her form reflecting the chamber's light in 1,000 subtle hues. "You must leave as soon as your injuries allow. Our laws forbid sustained contact with outsiders. It has been this way for generations. How long until I can travel? Your vessel is unsalvageable. We will provide transport, but it will take time to prepare one suitable for human physiology." She glanced back at him. "Perhaps 15 of your days. 15 days. 2 weeks in a world of living ice, with a ruler who understood grief the way he did." Marcus should have felt trapped. Instead, something in his chest, something that had been frozen since Julia's death, shifted almost imperceptibly. "Then I'll try not to cause an international incident," he said. Over the following days, Marcus discovered that Seraphine's world was more than just ice and isolation. The Glacians had built a civilization within and upon their crystalline planet. Their bodies naturally adapted to temperatures that would kill most species. They harvested energy from thermal currents deep below the surface, grew food in hydroponic caverns warmed by geothermal springs, and created art that made sound visible, sculptures of frozen music that chimed in harmonies beyond human hearing. Seraphine showed him these wonders herself, despite the disapproving whispers of her court. She claimed it was diplomatic necessity, ensuring he understood their culture. But Marcus noticed how she lingered in his presence, how her luminescence brightened when they talked. They spoke of everything and nothing. She told him about the weight of ruling alone, making decisions that affected billions, while her chambers remained empty of everything but echoes. He described the loneliness of the mining colonies, how Julia had been his warmth in the endless cold of space. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked him one evening, as they stood in her observation tower, watching the twin moons rise over fields of prismatic ice. Marcus thought of his daughter back on Earth, grown now with a family of her own. He thought of the empty years, the guilt, the slow acceptance. "I used to think grief was something to get over," he said. "Now I think it's something that makes room for new things, if you let it." Seraphine's hand, cool and smooth as polished stone, found his. "Then perhaps," she whispered, "we might both be brave enough to let it." The scandal rippled through the Glacian court like fractures spreading across thin ice. Marcus woke on the 8th morning of his stay to find the crystalline corridors buzzing with hushed conversations that stopped the moment he appeared. The servants who had grown comfortable with his presence now avoided his eyes. Even the chamber that had been prepared for him seemed colder, as if the palace itself had turned against him. He found Seraphine in her private garden, a vast cavern where bioluminescent plants grew in impossible spirals, their roots suspended in frozen mist. She stood motionless before a wall of living ice, her reflection fractured into 1,000 versions of herself. "They know," she said without turning, "about us." "There isn't an us," Marcus replied carefully, though his heart knew it for the lie it was. "We've just been talking. We've been doing far more than talking, and you know it." She finally faced him, and he was struck by how different she looked. Her usual composed radiance had dimmed to something raw and vulnerable. "Last night, when you held my hand while I spoke of Torvin, when I laughed for the first time in 4 decades at your ridiculous story about the broken recycler, the entire palace felt it. My emotional state affects the very structure of this world, Marcus. The ice knows what I feel." Before Marcus could respond, footsteps echoed through the garden. A Glacian woman appeared, younger than Seraphine, but sharing her ethereal beauty. Where Seraphine's coloring suggested deep winter, this woman shimmered with the pale gold of late autumn frost. "Sister," the newcomer said warmly, though her eyes held concern. "The council demands an audience." "Celeste." Seraphine's voice softened. "This is Marcus Webb. Marcus, my sister Celeste, the only member of my family who hasn't tried to control my life." Celeste studied Marcus with frank curiosity. "So you're the human who's made my sister glow like a supernova. The entire southern hemisphere has experienced temperature fluctuations. Do you have any idea how many climatologists are losing their minds trying to explain it?" "That's not his fault," Seraphine protested. "I didn't say it was bad." Celeste's smile was mischievous. "Frankly, it's about time something shook up this frozen mausoleum. But Seraphine, the council isn't amused. Regent Vorthen is calling for the humans' immediate deportation, and he's gathered enough support to make it happen." The council chamber was a cathedral of ice, its walls rising in geometric perfection toward a ceiling that opened to the pale sky. 12 Glacians sat in a semicircle, their forms rigid with disapproval. At their center sat Regent Vorthen, a being whose crystalline body had sharpened with age into something blade-like and severe. "Sovereign Valdris," Vorthen began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Your behavior threatens everything we've built. Our isolation has preserved our species for millennia. One human, one outsider, and you forget our most sacred laws." "I forget nothing," Seraphine replied, standing tall before them with Marcus at her side. "I merely question whether isolation has become imprisonment." "Question?" Another council member rose, her form crackling with agitation. You've done more than question. You've exposed our sanctuary to contamination. What happens when others learn of us through him? When ships come seeking our resources, our technology? I wouldn't, Marcus started, but Vorthen cut him off. Silence. You have no voice here, human. The Regent's gaze turned to Seraphine. We all grieve for Torvin. He was a fine consort, a worthy partner. But this is not grief. This is madness. Don't speak to me of Torvin. Seraphine's words came out sharp enough to crack stone. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Frost formed on the walls. You didn't hold him as his light faded. You didn't spend 47 cycles waking to silence, ruling with half a heart, freezing from the inside out because the only warmth you'd ever known was gone. Her voice broke, and Marcus stepped closer instinctively, his hand finding hers. The moment they touched, something extraordinary happened. Light blazed through Seraphine's crystalline form. But instead of the cold blue-white of her usual luminescence, it held warmth, gold and amber threading through ice. The council gasped. Impossible, Vorthen whispered. Glacians cannot generate heat. It goes against our fundamental nature. Perhaps, Celeste said from where she'd been watching. Our fundamental nature is more adaptable than you believed. That night, after hours of debate that resolved nothing, Marcus found Seraphine on the highest balcony of her palace. She stood at the edge, looking out over her world, endless plains of crystalline formations that caught and reflected the starlight in cascading rainbows. They want me to choose, she said as he approached. My people or you, my duty or my heart. Then choose your people. Marcus's words surprised even himself, but he continued. Seraphine, I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built. I've already lost one person I loved. I can't be responsible for you losing a world, she turned to him. And in her eyes, he saw something that made his breath catch. Not resignation, but defiance. When Torvin died, I thought I died with him, she said. I became ice in truth, not just form. Cold, unchanging, safe. She took his hands in hers, and again that impossible warmth flowed between them. You made me remember what it feels like to melt, to flow, to change. If my people cannot accept that their sovereign can evolve, then perhaps I'm ruling the wrong way. Or perhaps, a new voice interrupted. Your people simply need to see what you found. They turned to find Celeste accompanied by 3 other Glacians, younger members of the court Marcus had noticed watching. Them with curiosity rather than condemnation. There are others who support you? Sister, Celeste continued. Not just me. Those of us who've wondered if isolation has made us stagnant. Who've watched you suffer alone and wished for something, anything, to bring you back to life. She glanced at Marcus. We just didn't expect the answer to crash land during a solar storm. The council won't accept this, Seraphine said. Then we changed the council. One of the younger Glacians stepped forward. His name was Phelan, Marcus remembered. Not through force, but through proof. Let us see what this connection between you means. Let us understand it. Over the following days, something unprecedented occurred. Seraphine and Marcus allowed themselves to be studied, not as specimens, but as partners in an experiment that might reshape Glacian understanding. Scientists measured the energy fluctuations when they touched, the way Seraphine's physiology shifted in Marcus's presence. Philosophers debated what it meant for a species built on emotional control to witness their sovereign embracing emotional vulnerability. And slowly, carefully, perspectives began to shift. Marcus taught a group of young Glacians about human culture, sharing stories of Earth's diversity, its conflicts and reconciliations, its endless capacity for change. In return, they showed him the depths of Glacian civilization, their mathematics rendered in ice formations, their history preserved in crystalline archives that sang when touched. But it was a quiet moment in Seraphine's. Chambers that truly changed everything. Tell me about your daughter, she said one evening. Marcus smiled, pulling out a worn holo projector. Her name is Rachel. She's 43 now, has 2 kids of her own. After Julia died, I threw myself into work, traveled to the furthest colonies I could find. I missed so much of Rachel's life because I couldn't bear to be reminded of what I'd lost. Do you regret it? Every day. He looked at Seraphine. But being here with you, it's teaching me that honoring the dead doesn't mean stopping your life. It means living fully enough for both of you. Seraphine was quiet for a long moment. Then, Torvin and I wanted children. It's difficult for Glacians. Our physiology requires such precise conditions. We tried for decades. I thought when he died that the dream died too. Marcus understood what she was asking without her having to say it. Is it even possible? Our biologies are so different. I don't know. She took his hand, and that warmth flowed between them again. But perhaps that's what makes it worth trying. Not knowing, but hoping anyway. Outside, the first thermal storm in 47 years rolled across the crystalline plains. The ice didn't crack. It sang. The transformation began not with a declaration, but with a whisper. 3 months after Marcus was supposed to leave Chrysalis Prime, Seraphine stood before her people in the Plaza of Eternal Winter, a vast amphitheater carved from a single massive crystal formation. Thousands of Glacians had gathered, their luminescent forms creating a sea of shifting light that reflected off every surface. Marcus stood beside her, no longer a curiosity, but something far more dangerous to those who feared change, a symbol. My people, Seraphine began, her voice carrying across the plaza through the natural acoustics of the crystal. For 47 cycles, I have ruled you with a frozen heart. I believed that strength meant isolation, that wisdom meant unchanging, tradition, that love was a weakness I could no longer afford. The crowd stirred, uncertain. I was wrong. She reached for Marcus's hand, and the moment they touched, her entire form blazed with that impossible warmth, gold threading through ice, creating patterns that had never existed in Glacian physiology before. This human showed me that true strength lies not in refusing to change, but in having the courage to evolve. Regent Vorthen stepped forward from the council's section, his sharp features set in disapproval. Sovereign Valdris, this spectacle proves nothing. A temporary phenomenon, a chemical reaction. It's not temporary. Seraphine's free hand moved to rest on her abdomen, and the gesture sent shocked whispers rippling through the assembled crowd. I carry a child, our child, a being that should not exist by every law of biology we understand, yet exists nonetheless. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. Some Glacians pressed forward in wonder, others recoiled in horror. The council members began shouting over one another. Vorthen's voice rose above them all. Abomination! This violates the sanctity of our species. No, Celeste called out, moving to stand beside her sister. It violates your fear. There's a difference. Marcus felt Seraphine tremble beside him. He knew what this cost her, the vulnerability of exposing something so precious to potential rejection. He squeezed her hand gently, lending her his warmth as she had taught him to accept hers. I'm not asking for your permission, Seraphine continued, her voice steady despite the turmoil. I'm asking for your understanding. For generations, we've hidden behind our isolation, calling it wisdom. But wisdom without growth becomes stagnation. And I refuse to let my child, our children, inherit a world too afraid to embrace possibility. Children? Vorthen seized on the word. There's more than one? Seraphine's smile was radiant. The physicians believe there are two. Twins. One whose physiology leans toward Glacian, one toward human, but both carrying elements of each. They are bridges, Vorthen, living proof that the universe is larger and more wondrous than our fear allows us to believe. The weeks that followed tested everything Seraphine and Marcus had built. The council remained divided. Protests erupted in some districts, while others celebrated in streets that hadn't seen public joy in decades. Scientists from across the Glacian territories requested permission to study the pregnancy, while traditionalists demanded it be terminated for the safety of the species. Through it all, Marcus discovered reserves of courage he didn't know he possessed. He wasn't a soldier or a politician, just an engineer who'd loved and lost and somehow found the strength to love again. But when angry crowds gathered outside the palace, when threats arrived in encrypted messages, when even some of Seraphine's supporters questioned whether they'd gone too far, he stood firm. "You don't have to do this," Seraphine told him one night when the strain showed in the lines around his eyes. "I could send you away. Claim the pregnancy was achieved through other means. You'd be safe." "Safe?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "I've been safe for 3 years, Seraphine. Safe and empty, and slowly dying inside. You gave me back my life. I'm not walking away from that. From you. From them." He placed his hand gently over hers on her abdomen. "From our family." The turning point came from an unexpected source. An elderly Glacian named Meridian, one of the oldest living members of their species, requested an audience. She moved slowly, her crystalline form worn smooth by centuries, but her eyes held a clarity that commanded respect. "I was there," she told the assembled council with Seraphine and Marcus present, "when we first chose isolation. 700 cycles ago, after the burning wars nearly destroyed us. We retreated not out of wisdom, but out of fear. We called it preservation, but truly, we were hiding." Vorthen tried to interrupt, but Meridian silenced him with a gesture. "I have lived long enough to see what that choice cost us. We became perfect, unchanging, and in our perfection, we forgot how to adapt, how to grow, how to face challenges we hadn't anticipated." She turned to Seraphine. "This child, these children, frighten us because they represent the unknown. But the unknown is not our enemy. It never was. Our enemy has always been our own rigidity." She approached Marcus, studying him with ancient eyes. "You are not Glacian. You are fragile, temporary, impossibly warm. And in 3 months, you have done what centuries of our own people could not. You reminded our sovereign that a life lived without risk is not life at all, merely existence." Meridian turned back to the council. "I vote to not only accept this union, but to celebrate it, to make Crystallis Prime not a fortress of isolation, but a sanctuary where different forms of life might learn from one another, where bridges can be built between species, between worlds, between hearts." She smiled. "Let these children be the first of many such bridges." The vote was close. 5 council members stood with Vorthen in opposition. 7 stood with Meridian and Seraphine. It was enough. The children came during the festival of Dei, first light, when Crystallis Prime's orbit brought it closest to their sun and the entire planet blazed with reflected radiance. Seraphine's labor was unlike anything the Glacian physicians had encountered, her body shifting between states, ice and warmth in constant flux, as it adapted to bring forth beings that belonged to 2 worlds. Marcus held her through all of it, his own fear eclipsed by wonder at her strength. The first child emerged glowing like sunrise, skin that held both the translucence of Glacian crystal and the warm amber tones of human flesh. Her hair was the pale gold of early morning light, and when she opened her eyes, one was the pale blue of her mother's people, while the other held Marcus's warm brown. "Solène," Seraphine whispered, cradling the tiny form. "She who brings warmth to winter." The second child came quieter, smaller, but no less miraculous. His skin held deeper blue tones threaded through with human pink, creating patterns that shifted with his breathing. His hair was dark like his father's, but caught light like his mother's crystalline formations. "Brennan," Marcus said softly, running a gentle finger over his son's impossibly soft cheek. "Defender of bridges." The moment the twins drew their first breaths, Something extraordinary happened throughout the palace. The crystalline structures that had remained unchanged for millennia began to shift, forming new patterns, geometric designs that incorporated curves and warmth alongside sharp precision. The ice sang in harmonies that had never existed before, blending the deep resonances of glacial architecture with something that sounded almost like a human lullaby. Words spread across Crystallis Prime within hours. By the time the twin moons rose, crowds had gathered outside the palace, not in protest, but in wonder. They came to witness the impossible made real, to see proof that the universe was stranger and more beautiful than their isolation had allowed them to imagine. Over the following years, Marcus and Seraphine transformed not just their family, but their entire world. They opened Crystallis Prime to carefully selected visitors from other species, scientists, artists, families seeking refuge from war or persecution. The planet became known throughout the sector as the Sanctuary of Bridges, a place where different forms of life could meet without fear. Selene and Brennan grew into children who could regulate their body temperature at will, who could generate both the cold precision of Glacian thought and the warm chaos of human emotion. They spoke 3 languages by age 2, Glacian, Human Standard, and a third tongue they seemed to create between themselves, full of clicks and musical tones that made adults smile without understanding why. Other mixed unions followed, carefully and with much deliberation. Not just human Glacian, but other species learning that love could bridge gaps that politics and war never could. Some unions produced children, others didn't, but all expanded what was thought possible. Rachel, Marcus's daughter, finally came to visit when the twins were 3. Marcus waited nervously at the landing platform, uncertain how she'd react to the life he'd built so far from Earth. She stepped off the transport, older than when he'd last seen her, but her eyes, her mother's eyes, were warm. Behind her, 2 children peered out curiously at the crystalline world. "Dad," she said simply, then pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You look happy. Actually happy for the first time since Mom died." "I am." Marcus pulled back to look at her. "Rachel, I'm sorry I missed so much. Don't." She smiled through tears. "Mom used to say that grief was just love with nowhere to go. You found somewhere to put it. Somewhere beautiful." She glanced past him to where Seraphine stood with the twins. "I'd like to meet them." The introductions were awkward,